I would say here the experience, and it's been going on since I woke up this morning, and it's quite unusual actually. There's usually a sense of what wants to be spoken, and now there's absolutely no sense at all. So here we go. I've talked to Jennifer, I've written it out. I just brought my the transcripts that my assistant gave me that was edited by AI. Is it AI? Yeah. It's horrible. I cannot make any sense out of it, and I was the one who spoke it. So I wouldn't just think everything that pops out of AI is cool, because it's not. So we just maybe have to think about a different AI, whatever program. But, so we'll just see what happens here. Every time that I have been invited to teach here, and thank you. This is such an incredible gift and offering and privilege, and in this gorgeous place, and to be with you all. It's really an extraordinary thing. I do not take it lightly. But the focus is sort of a natural outflow of the power of the beauty of nature, right? So I know the first time that I came here and meditated, it was just this automatic dive into the river, because the river was the presiding entity of this area, right? If you go where we live, I look out my window, and from here to there, it seems like, there's 14,000 foot mountains. So that's the presiding, entity or element within that land. So here, the river was that presiding element. And the beauty, I mean, it's like you've been dropped into Eden or something, and so you're just like, ah. And the living of your realization, the embodiment of your realization, at least here, and maybe because it's a reaction that as a child I lived in sort of a different dimension. And like I said the other day, that wasn't a mistake, that was wisdom, because it allowed me to live in a pretty dysfunctional, I would underline that about 5 times, environment. And so I sort of was lifted up out of it, and I was affected, there's no doubt about that. But I lived in a different world, and it was a much more divine and interesting and light-filled world. And then, of course, I had to come home and come back to the body and come back in and live this realization of the multiplicity of life in the body, in the moment, raising children and, keeping house and going to work and, everything. My life very early on became very practical. And there was a wisdom there. This girl has to come in and be home and be in the moment. And my first husband was a very grounded, practical, earthy human. So he was sort of my anchor. And I learned to live more in the body and in the present moment. And the one place that we met beautifully was in nature. So we spent a lot of our time camping and traveling the mountains and going all over, hanging out in the streams and the lakes, and we took our kids with us everywhere. Shayla was raised in, what were those things called, a jerry pack? You know what I'm talking about? You used to throw the kid in the back and go everywhere. She was raised in one. But what I realized, and I was sort of tuning into that yesterday, and I talked with Jennifer a little bit we talked about that this morning, that we've spent so much focus on embodiment and living it and tuning into the unconscious patterns that are running your life and seeing how they can be brought to consciousness, and then therefore life presents itself as love. It doesn't always seem like love, but it always is love. And then it's dissolved, those particular traumas and wounds and unconscious patterns. And much time has been spent on zeroing in on the root, because we only have one or two themes in our life. You know, you said it so beautifully last night, Kathy, you know, that if you look at that one theme, why doesn't anyone take care of me? Then you'll see that it spreads out throughout the whole life. It just keeps popping up everywhere. And so the emphasis and the focus and, the teaching, the pointing out, at least in more of the direct way, has been to access that. And so for years, much of the focus is finding those patterns and then speaking your truth, which a lot of that was just throwing your junk on someone else and saying that's your truth. But, we had to go through that phase. And that phase is pretty much over. I mean, it's going to unfold. And I liked your question again, Kathy, because it just unfolds at a certain point. You don't have to do anything. There's enough of a consciousness, enough of an awareness, enough of a light quality that illuminates those particular patterns quite automatically. You see it on the hoof, so to speak. You see it in your life. And you can either just go, oh, well, sweetheart, it's over. Or you can just see it with the light of awareness, and that's enough. Touch it with awareness. Or you can be drawn to following it back to the seed or the core. What is it that said that I am not worthy of loving, and my purpose in life is to care for others? There's a seed there. And it can be your mother's seed, your father's seed. Often it's karma. And again, I don't mean negative and positive. I just mean experiences. We are all deeply influenced by thousands of experiences. That's what the gift of the human body is that we can experience the totality of the one in the physicality. It's like you push around the clay and you go, well, if I'm, to misuse power, I can intellectualize that, or I can experience it. And then it's not good or bad. You weren't a bad person because you misused power. You just saw the results of the misuse of power. Do you hear what I'm saying? It's very simple. And so when you come in this incarnation, one of the focuses of the life, one of the reasons of the birth, is to resolve, to make conscious those unconscious patterns that weren't quite fully transmuted. There's a residue. And you just, some of the experiences are such full of pain and horror, really, in many ways, is that you just can't do it. You just can't take care of it. You can't let it go. And so, this loving quality just goes, okay, sweetheart, let's put it in your left hip over here, and we'll just wait. And then when you're able to process it and to see it and to let it go, then it will be brought to the surface. So all of that is just a part of the self-realization. And of course, then the real purpose that we are coming into this incarnation is to self-realize. There's really only two reasons. So the self-realization just has its own timing. I was thinking about this morning, that what makes, say like Michael's experience where it just went, right? I don't know. What makes Jennifer experience where she's in the warrior pose and she just, the Kundalini completely blew her into her nature. I don't know. I mean, many of you and some of you here have just, you're going along your life and all of a sudden you're blown into your nature. And for many others, we dedicate ourselves to, retreats and teachers and going around the world and practices and, liver cleanses and, the works, right? We just work and work and work and work. And, that has its benefit as well. It's just a matter of karma. There's a certain kind of translucency or a certain kind of ripeness. And when the fruit is ripe, it will drop. And it could care less how you perceive that in your life. I remember this woman with one of Aj's retreats, and she came up and she said, I am pissed off. She said, this big elephant has trunked through my tent and knocked it all to hell. And I had no desire for any of this. You guys are crazy, And she was quite angry. It really messed up her life. She liked her life the way it was, but it was time, right? Finally you get this, it's time. And you wouldn't be here if it wasn't the living spirit within you that wants to know itself in you. You wouldn't be here. You'd go to some lodge and hang around in your bikini and, have margaritas and great sex in the cabana, right? You wouldn't be here, but you are. So part of this, I'm afraid, I don't know why I'm here, this is just, I play this out, I don't know why, but I do, and then I go home and I go exactly back to my life as I've always known it. It's a bunch of rot. You're not telling yourself the truth. So it's really very, very helpful to tell yourself the truth. You're here because it's time. You're here because you can, as a being or a soul, whatever you want to call yourself. And you're here because what you're looking for has brought you here. So you can hang out and have one foot in and one foot out for another 20, 30, 40, 50 years or so, or maybe 20, 40, 30 lifetimes or so. Aja just says, it's a matter of time, and it will know itself. But you can spend another 20 or 30 lifetimes if you want to. Honestly, it doesn't matter. But you're here, you're born in a certain time on this planet, at a certain transition in the planet. So why do you think you're here now? And it's always to be awake, to be a part of the transition, and to serve it. There's no other reason. And you can intellectualize it, and you can fight it, and you can try to control it, and you can do whatever you want to do. It's perfectly fine as part of the play. Or you can just see it as it is. You're born for this. But what all that emphasis on liberation, because I think, it does like this, right? We go this way as a collective and we do it well and learn our mistakes and transmute. And then we pop over to the opposite and we play this one out. And for many thousands of years in the spiritual traditions, we tended to spiritualize. You know what I'm saying? Especially I think in the Eastern traditions, it just wasn't true. I mean, they really got that the contents of the mind is actually not true. it's all a collection and an absorption through time and space. And so then all of the negativities and delusions and, whatever was spiritualized, it was denied. And so then the last, I'd say, in my world anyway, the last 15 years, it kind of went the opposite, where you sift through every little thought and everything is my truth and don't, and interrupt with my truth and blah, 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 blah. Well, it was almost like an overreaction. So now I think we're starting to come collectively in the ability of, yes, the brighter your awareness, the more the deep and conscious truths and authenticity, and we are our authority. I don't care who the guru is or who the true, whatever it is, that if it comes right down to it, there is something that comes forward, is the current that lives within you, and that is the authority. But that doesn't mean then you blow off every teacher and blow off, everything you read, and because that was a part of what I perceived for the last, I think especially the last 10 years. You hear where I'm going? So now here we are. And there's a kind of a clarity and a kind of a power of honesty and light that's pouring through the planet. And it's bringing the deep-seated shadow. It isn't like the shadow all of a sudden happened. I mean, if you've read a book or looked at history, the earth has had god-awful wars and rape and insanity, just, century after century after century. I remember hearing, can't remember his name, Thurman. He's that beautiful Irma Thurman's father. Oh well. Anyway, he's an incredible lecturer. He's a deeply dedicated Tibetan practitioner, but he is just this gifted professor, a gifted lecturer. And he was talking about the history of Tibet. Well, in Tibet was an extreme warrior culture. And Tibet took over part of China and just hell raised. It was awful what it did to China. You hear what I'm trying to say? This is not new, but we're now knowing about it. It's instant. We're watching it as it's happening. So it seems overwhelming. But if you really look at this sort of big view, it's the increased light, the increased consciousness. Supposedly, and I don't know where the figure came from, less than 1% of the whole world's population ever self-realized. Now, every other time you turn around, you're talking to someone who is having either a spontaneous awakening or they're starting to be curious and look in different, books or mostly the internet or, I don't look at the internet. It's just not my reality. But occasionally Nate will be watching something on the internet and I'll walk through and there'll be the new teacher. And you just go, whoa, 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 whoa. There's a big glimpse, there's no doubt, there's a shift. But maybe that, person needs to go back and do whatever, sit on the cushion or have a child or get married a couple of times. It's not seasoned. You know what I'm saying? I asked a friend, we have this beautiful friend, Karma Choing in Vajradhya, and he's a beautiful young Chinese man. And he's just sort of like a, saint or something, that he's given permission to hang out with us for a little while. He's a beautiful human. And I said, well, what is that? why are there so many of these teachers just popping up, everywhere? And it's usually on the internet. And he said, well, part of it is they make money. You get paid for doing stuff like that, I guess. I don't know. But anyway. So now we're witnessing the shadow. And it doesn't mean that you check out. It doesn't mean that you don't get involved. But, as Jennifer was speaking last night, I think, with Andrea, is, you enter, if that's your dharma, if that calls you forth, but you enter empty, right? You don't enter with the whole burden on your back of all of your cultural history, being a victim as a child. You hear what I'm trying to say? You aren't clean and clear in your active participation, maybe in politics or something ecologically. You're dragging your whole background on your back, and that will take you down. My generation was kind of the generation that did an awful lot of, demonstrations and, all sorts of things. And I notice that the friends my age, we still kind of like to sit down and talk politics. I just don't believe it anymore. It kind of is like fun, and it, it's not that what's happening is fun, but you know what I'm saying. It's kind of enjoyable, especially when someone believes like you do. I like that. Yeah, you've got it. Because that's what I believe. But but if you just you can dance in that. That's okay. We're human beings. We've got opinions, and then it just goes away. It doesn't leave a stink. You know what I'm saying? There's no residue. It's just she kind of hung out a little bit, and I like Bob Dylan, and so do you. And if I can help, then I'm called forth to be a part of this dance because I can help. I've got the skills to help. Now, this is a long runaround to just say what I've noticed, however, and even though in the over 21 years that I've taught, literally every Dharma talk is followed with a guided meditation every time. That I hear frequently, what's the point? That's just like a, dark, light, luminous, central channel. What's the point? That's not me. That's not important. That has nothing to do with me. What do you mean emptiness? And I felt the same way. I was very deeply trained with Buddhist training in meditation, and I'm quite grateful for it. But I also knew that if I just corralled the craziness of the brain, of the thoughts for a while, that presence came through. So I wasn't after being a good meditator. I was after presence coming through. I loved silent retreats because eventually presence came through. But the fundamental, invisible, I'll go back. Using the word empty and the void was a real turnoff. I had no interest at all in emptiness and the void, none. And it was because I didn't understand what it meant. They never really gave that too much. And I wasn't a particular, quote, Buddhist. I just, that's where the training was the most prevalent. I tried in Christian traditions in different ways, and Sufi, where you danced and went in circles and whatever. And I just couldn't find it there. So in Buddhism was the training that I was looking for. It was direct. I could access what I was after directly in the Buddhist practices. I still don't see myself as a Buddhist. Probably the most sane, maybe, tradition. But I didn't get what emptiness was. I didn't think it had anything to do with me. I just was after the liberation that was coming up, because I opened the door to, I always say I had 4 trains of karma. Most people have 1 or 2 cars. I had 4 train loads of karma. It was just, layer after layer after layer after layer after layer after layer for years. And it's still happening. It's just happening from a very different perspective. So I was just interested in the unified consciousness, because that was what I call presence. And that did come through in silence and meditation every time. So I was after that. I could care less about emptiness. But I didn't understand it. I didn't know actually what it was. And the actuality is, it speaks of the non-form. There is no central location. There is no fundamental separate form. It is empty of each and every form. It is the totality of being. It is the essence of our lives. It's what forms us. It's what creates us. It's what keeps us alive. It's what nourishes us. It's what directs us. It is running the whole show. So it is empty of any separate sense of identity. Hallelujah, hallelujah, hallelujah. Now that does not sound at all appealing to the individual. The last thing the individual is interested in is not standing out as a form, right? It's the last thing the me is interested in. And sometimes you have enough clarity that you know there's fear, because it's fear of dissolution. And make no mistake, that identity of yourself does dissolve. Make no mistake about that. So sometimes it's the fear that puts it over here. And other times it's just your I don't know how to say this. Your focus, your attention is like this. My thoughts, my tendencies, my this, my that, this, that, da, 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 da. And the whole world is this little tiny sphere called me. And when you realize what you have denied by just focusing, and you can have these big ahas and just go right back and live in this little tiny sphere. So that's part of the fear of the emptiness. Partly we just don't understand what it means. That was certainly true here for me. And the other is there's just like a rubber band that just keeps coming back to its original point of reference called me. And again, it's sort of fascinating. Can there be all sorts of insights and visions and blowing open and seeing the whole thing, and then just go right back. And part of it is just a sense of safety, familiarity. I know this, I can control this. So by opening to the actuality, it doesn't mean you become, like some people pretend. And I think it's innocent, actually, in most cases. But lots of times it's a pretending of a spiritual concept, right? You're calm, and you only eat 4 things, and you speak very slowly, and you only allow certain ideas in it, and you would never, ever, ever, ever watch the news, and God knows a murder mystery, awful, taboo. One of the most brilliantly awake, grounded, beautiful, amazing, stunning people I've ever known loved murder mysteries. And we exchange murder mysteries like mad, you know. So, you know what I'm saying? I'm exaggerating it. But that's a concept, it's an ideal of what spirituality is. If you've really ever been with someone who really is awake and they've opened to their nature, and for some, you may be wired up that you have visions in all sorts of cities, and others, you know, you're as common as mud. One of the most beautiful awake humans, again, another one that I've met, they're both gone now, they both have died. Someone says, well, what's your, you know, temple or tradition? She was a ceramist. And she said, I'm standing on it. Earth, man, all the way. And she was the most clairvoyant, unconditionally loving, beautiful, amazing, stunning human being. And it all was woke up through extreme pain, extreme loss and pain. I asked her one time, I said, you know, how did this all happen? She said, she was Danish. And I guess the Danes really went for raping different islands, like, you know, all of us do, and taking those spices and then sending them back to Europe. So her father was, you know, I think quite wealthy, and 2 or 3 generations of Danes that lived on these Bahamas. So, you know, she was raised with the father that she adored and raised on, you know, the islands, and, you know, pretty groovy life. And her father took some friends out and the boat captured and he died. They all died. And the mother, very cold, not able to feel, and just froze. And so sent her back to Denmark to a boarding school and separated her mother, brother, and father and where she lived. And when the war broke out, the mother and the father made their way to the US and they made her stay in Denmark. They wouldn't let her come. So she rode out the war in Denmark. So she was about 7 when that whole thing broke. And she said, I was this, you know, pretty happy, you know, young woman. And then I was this, fully clairvoyant and in unconditional love. So what I'm trying to say is, you know, it's, you learn, or it isn't that you learn, you just get it finally, that you start to open up to the unimaginable, multi-dimensional lives that we live in, and the miracles and the reflection of God is everywhere. There's nowhere that it's not. And it may be that you've lost your beloved parent and, you know, your whole life immediately changes in a moment. And you could have been terribly victimized and hateful and mean and not trusting, and all sorts of things could have happened. And for her, she woke up to love. And she woke up, you know, the sight opened up. Amazing clairvoyant. I have wonderful stories about what she could see. Preston's a trip to live in, let me tell you. No. So what I'm attempting to get at, and I know I'm circling and circling and circling, is the vertical channel in your spine, the dark ground that is infinite, the luminosity That is God and silence arising. It's the dynamic aspect of silence. Love is the interconnected luminosity. There's nowhere that it's not, and there's nothing that it does not abide, and it is the creatrix. So whether you hate people or love people, or this is okay and you don't like this and you're uncomfortable about this and you have to have this, fine, that's the play. But if you dismiss your fundamental nature because you don't get it, or you can't see it, or it's not your, everyday wash dishes experience, you're missing the boat. And I'm sorry to say that. It's your fundamental structure that allows the body to form itself and to be alive and to function with the five senses and to move and play and dance and think. All of these great thinkers, I'm not putting it down, thinking the mind has done this. I mean, it's like glorious. But it's not who you are. It has nothing to do with who you are. But this invisible, the fundamental ground, the emptiness, the luminous, the love, not the Valentine romantic love. That's wonderful. It's probably the closest that we come in the human condition. But all of you, if you have a few years on you, it's 6 months up, 6 months down, right? It's going to bring everything out that has not been brought to the surface. And some of us, we just learn to live with it. And others, we say, okay, that's not your fault. It's no one's fault. It's just that that particular relationship brings out the deepest wounds and defenses and fears. And so you either, work with that, or you blow it off and ignore it, and mostly can't stand each other. You just don't want to, break up the dog and the cat. You know what I'm saying? What do we do with the kids, So love is absolutely, unimaginably impersonal. It's totally, unimaginably impersonal. And then it starts to move and touch and permeate and call forth and open and heal and dissolve. That's its function. And then it includes this personal, it's the creatrix of this personal form. If you ever went to Sunday school, and you had this little thing up on the wall or something, and it said, God is love, they got that right. Maybe nothing else, but God is love. And what that means is we are made up of love. These cells can only be formed coming out of emptiness, coming out of the non-form, coming out of the womb of everything. We share the womb with the trees and the mountains and the ocean and each and every one of us, and people we love and people that we can't stand. We all arise from that same dark womb. And then it arises naturally. It isn't like, okay, now it's time for me to get up and create a mountain. It just arises spontaneously. It's one of the great mysteries. It wants to know itself. There's this beautiful enlightenment is the, what is it? The recognition of the myriad of forms. You guys can probably say it better than I can. Byron Katie is a master at that. Joy in the 10,000 things, right? Because it's all God. It's all the essence. It's all this. That's why the beautiful poem, that Abhideva, when she was saying about, I look into the flower and the flower looks back. That's the reality. It's not some airy-fairy cool thing. It's actually how it is. And so if your focus is just, my fears and this and that, and I'm going to do that, and, and the dark and the light and the vertical channel and the fundamental and the living light that everything arises and falls back into, that's pushed away, you'll never be free. You really won't. You may be more functional, and there's nothing wrong with that. You may be better people. My question has always been, you be around the meditation crowd, and we spent, I think, maybe 12 years doing retreats at the Zen Center in Crestone. Wonderful, mostly men. There were a couple of ladies, and wonderful men, and really funny. And the Zen scene is to tell these jokes that no one can get, because it's like, I don't know, or be spontaneous, and play these whatever, and everyone, it's just part of the Zen scene, But they meditate and meditate and meditate and meditate and meditate. Those boys, they meditate. And yet, I looked around, and maybe one, maybe two out of the whole crowd, and we're talking doing it since they've been 19, are actually awake. What is that? You hang out into the Tibetan scene, and people have practiced, they do 10,000 things here and 100,000 there, and then 400,000 over here, and then 500,000 over here, and 60,000 over here. And they're really wonderful people, but they have no idea about being awake. How is that? Why does that happen? My sense is it's where your attention goes. In the direct way, I don't even call this the direct way. I call it, the non-dual, I call it the direct way. It's pointing your attention to what you are. And you've at least got a chance of recognizing something that is not the contents of your mind and not the spiritual contents of your mind. Because you can spin in the spiritual contents of your mind forever and think you're going someplace. The meditation crowd, they really usually have very nice lives. They're very clean. Everyone cleaned up after the hippie phase. Remember when, Trungpa Rinpoche, they all wore suits. And all the men put on suits. And they all wore their hair really short, I kind of entered into that phase. I didn't wear suits or cut my hair, but you know what I'm saying. Everyone looked like Trungpa. Or I hung out into the Vipassana. And so the Vipassana was very mindful. And their lives actually were nice lives, they were functional and balanced and clear and, really nice lives. But you were also warned, you never went out of the boundary of your body. It was dangerous. You certainly didn't go into any of the intuitive worlds. That was dangerous. And you never spoke of enlightenment. because it would create a longing. You hear what I'm trying to say? We are so much more than any of that. But you've got to move out of this little prison. I'm this way, I'm that way, I don't like this, I do. There's a current, and I know it's time, you're probably going, there's a current, and the current lives within you. You're not an exception. And that current contains the way for you. It will draw you to teachers, countries, locations, traditions, because it is the best that can serve you. It'll even draw you to teachers that look like perhaps they're very abusive. But that was all perfectly in place. Either it was a karmic dance that had to be played out, or perhaps it showed that you trusted someone else's truth more than your own. Who knows? I don't know. But this current is most accessible in your heart. You will not find it in your head. And it's mostly unformed. And the realization, meaning you can't capture it, it's not a concept. It's like a feeling, or it moves through you, or, you just find yourself moving in this direction, or you find yourself moving this decision. And everyone around you going, well, that's not logical. What the hell are you doing about that? I don't know. And it's the right decision, right? So the invisible to the five senses, and then if you're wired up a certain way, it actually even becomes visible. But it really, I find that it makes very little difference whether you're visually, clairvoyantly seeing it, or whether it's a tone, a feeling, a sensing. In fact, probably the sensing is a little more accurate because you don't have this symbol means this. None of what came forward here I had any idea about. None. Zilch. None. It just came forward. And it recognized itself. I didn't have anything confirming it. When I first met my teacher, and I was so shy and neurotic and couldn't speak. I just couldn't speak. Can't shut me up now. And I just said, and he was very kind. He didn't make people go up and talk if they were terrified, and he could see that I was quite shy and terrified. And I said, what about the dark? Because it had been unfolding in my life for years, and I had no one, I didn't know it was the void or emptiness. But it knew itself, and it wanted to know itself, and it just unfolded and unfolded and unfolded and unfolded. And he went, go there. It's your foundation. It's your home. It's the cosmic mother. It's the womb. It's why you're here. And I don't care if you're an intellectual genius and that's all you pay attention to, or you could care less and you're out digging in your garden. It does not matter one bit. you still are birthed and nourished and sustained and carried by that. That's keeping your seat. And then everything unfolds from that. Everything unfolds from that. Perfectly for you. The way knows the way. We are born for this. And everything you have need of will be given. All the power, the insight, the guidance. Some of you are dreamers, so much comes to me in my dreams. Others, just quick and sudden insights. No one is left out. And it's time. It's time.